Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to be able to stand in the House and speak to today's opposition motion regarding the Liberal government's decision to restrict the expansion of the Billy Bishop Toronto City Airport. You see, Mr. Speaker, having spent approximately 20 years in aviation, I'm aware firsthand of the challenges and opportunities that come with growth and expansion of airports. Airport development is always a hotly contested discussion, and so it should be. In the early 90s, the government at that time decided that they were going to get out of the airport business. With the introduction of the National Airports Policy, a new framework was defined with relation to the federal government's role in aviation. NASA airports comprised of the 26 airports across Canada that were deemed as critical links for our country. These airports were deemed essential to Canada's air transport system. These airports also serve 94% of the air traffic in Canada. The airports were transferred under lease to airport authorities and, in some cases, municipalities. The infrastructure in many of these airports, if not all, was antiquated and in need of desperate attention. Through these transfer negotiations, reinvestment monies were given. But the expectation for these airports that they were to do everything in their power to build strong business cases so that they could be self-sufficient. Mr. Speaker, airports have very few revenue generation streams. While with the transfer of airports and newfound independence also came the realization that user pay systems were needed. Airport improvement fees became the norm, and today we have airports that are incredible examples of the NASA airport transfer. We also have airports that struggle daily to be competitive and to remain innovative, struggle daily to ensure that the safety precautions are taken. Mr. Speaker, while we all share love for the Maple Leaf and common borders, the reality is that airports compete from one to the next for machinery and for air service for their community. Airport authorities and municipalities are now responsible for developing the business case for development and creative solutions for achieving their air service development goals. The land that surrounds airports is oftentimes valuable agriculture, and as our communities grow, we have seen residential encroachment around airports. In my former position, I was tasked with promoting regional, provincial, and national passenger cargo and tourism opportunities on the world stage. Mr. Speaker, I was the guy or the person that was sitting before the airlines, marketing our country, marketing my community, and marketing our province, ensuring that we were competitive. During my years, I had the opportunity to represent Canada throughout Europe, the Middle East, Asia, and the Americas on trade missions, industry conferences, and on regulatory panels. I've also had the chance to represent on industry topics such as regarding air service development, cargo, supply chain, management, security, regional tourism opportunities. And Mr. Speaker, I've heard some of the arguments around unfair monopoly on slots, concerns over environmental and potential noise pollution, all valid points. All concerns that are seen throughout Canada. But we're missing a key point. Canada needs to remain competitive. And how do we do this? By removing trade barriers, by creating innovative air policy and trade policies, by removing barriers for the movement of passengers and cargo, and by ensuring seamless flow of goods and people to and from Canada. By doing everything we can to promote and facilitate growth of Canadian companies, by protecting and growing Canadian jobs and products. By doing this, Canada will and can continue to grow. Expanding the Billy Bishop Airport would allow any company that uses the C-Series aircraft to benefit from having access to downtown Toronto, whether it be Air Canada, Porter, or WestJet. Carriers are also increasingly asking airports for longer runways. With the creation of new machinery comes new safety policies regarding the safe operations of aircraft from manufacturers, not just Bombardier, but Boeing and Airbus. So why are carriers being asked to lengthen their runways or provide longer runways? Because it's easier on equipment and provides greater safety precautions in the event of unpredictable weather conditions. Mr. Speaker, currently Porter has Q400 aircraft, and the current CEO has said that the current length of the runway with the ever increasingly challenging weather climate that we have and the issues that we have in terms of the new regulatory policy coming from, or safety policies coming from the carriers and the manufacturers, that they're being increasingly asked to lengthen the runway. So it is a challenge for airports, authorities, or municipalities to be able to fund this. Billy Bishop is not the only one that is facing concerns over these safety precautions. Mr. Speaker, Billy Bishop Airport is considered to be one of the busiest in Canada. Roughly 2.5 million passengers passed through the terminal last year, and this number is expected to grow over the course of 2016. The runways are currently at 3,990 feet, and with this increased, this new proposed expansion, it would bring it to about 5,400 feet and allow for aircraft to run hotter and faster and safer. On a typical weekday, there are 202 commercial takeoffs or landings on the island, connecting airports to 24 short-haul destinations in Eastern Canada and the United States, connecting Canadian passengers and cargo to U.S. markets and vice versa. Business is good, Mr. Speaker, but in the early 2000s, when the airport infrastructure was falling apart and Air Canada Jazz was the only commercial carrier flying to one destination, this airport was able to sell a vision to a carrier. Somebody believed in them. Mr. Speaker, in Canada, we champion our pioneer spirit. The Billy Bishop Airport should be penalized for having a carrier believe in them, invest in their project and the future of this critical transportation hub. Porter shouldn't be penalized for having the fortitude to take bold steps forward, despite a national aviation climate that protects its largest carriers. Both Porter Airlines and Billy Bishop shouldn't be scrutinized for slots monopoly or anti-competition, as WestJet faced the very same challenge when we were starting out. Yes, I was a WestJet owner. And in our larger airports, both of these carriers still enjoy the very same opportunities that they are complaining about at Billy Bishop. When small airports and communities across Canada are being held hostage by big carriers who wield their influence by pulling code share and shift their services at a whim, regardless of the importance and vital connectivity that air service provides, somebody has to stand up for them. And we should be applauding airports and municipalities and airport authorities that are taking the bold step forward and trying to do everything in their power to preserve their air service. But, Mr. Speaker, this is about Bombardier and saving jobs, and potentially saving a government bailout by creating an opportunity and providing leadership in getting these groups around a table for open and transparent discussions. The member from Spadina Fort York has been vocal opponent of any airport expansion for any purpose since Porter began growing its operations out of the airport. In a letter to a citizens group aimed at stopping the growth of the airport, the member from Spadina Fort York wrote, and I quote, "No jets, no expansion, period." But that's not all, and it's been mentioned earlier today. Just days after the election, the Minister of Transport used Twitter as a sounding board to announce that there would be no expansion at the Billy Bishop Airport. Mr. Speaker, let me put this in perspective for the honourable members of this House. Airports are key economic drivers in the regions and the communities they serve. Billy Bishop is responsible for 6,500 jobs, $385 million in wages, and over $2 billion in economic output. Airports are communities in the regions they serve. It is also a major contributor to taxes to the City of Toronto and the federal government to the tune of $71 million. Mr. Speaker, this motion is about jobs and economic growth, and the airport is a major contributor to both. Blocking the expansion of this airport will limit the Canadian market for C-Series aircraft, which will affect workers across Canada. And it sends the wrong message to Bombardier's customers, and it gives their competitors an unfair advantage. Shouldn't we be doing everything for a Canadian company? Expanding the airport would facilitate billions of dollars in potential orders for Bombardier from Canadian carriers. Mr. Speaker, instead of spending billions bailing out a major company, the Liberal government should redirect their focus and concentrate on reducing red tape for entrepreneurs rather than adding it. It was our former Conservative government who supported the smart development of the Billy Bishop Airport because it provides a convenient travel option for passengers who are going to and from Toronto, and it provides a critical transportation gateway. to Canada, to another community. And that is why the federal government supported the construction of the tunnel to the airport. This new Liberal government unilaterally imposed its will on Torontonians and the Toronto City Council. This is a local issue. The City of Toronto should be responsible to decide whether to allow the airport to expand given these considerations. And I've heard the argument from the member opposite. And I agree, there are conditions that have to be met, but allow the airport to be able to fulfill that and work with the City of Toronto. In fact, the city made its concerns with possible expansion known, and the project proponent will have to demonstrate that it can and will satisfy Toronto's concerns. Let's let the two of them have the discussion and be able to work through it. They were very clear that the landing slots and passenger cap would have to be maintained and the strict noise limits had to remain in place. This is no different than airports across Canada. We all faced it. Yet this Minister of Transport unilaterally blocked the right of the City of Toronto to hold consultations and decide whether or not to allow their local airport to expand and grow along with the city. Now, the City of Toronto also has a very aggressive event management group that they're going after a number of big international events. This airport would help alleviate congestion at their bigger airport and facilitate more tourists, more passengers to the City of Toronto. If the minister had stated any evidence-based reason for his denial of the potential airport expansion, then proponents of the airport expansion would be able to alter their plans to integrate these concerns and regulations. Mr. Speaker, I think we can all agree that the people who are most impacted for the future of the Billy Bishop Airport are those who live in Toronto, not Ottawa and not Montreal. Mr. Speaker, for a government that obsesses endlessly about consulting on everything, the deliberate lack of consultation in this case is telling. When it comes to economic growth and job creation, this Liberal government should act as an enabler rather than an impediment, as it clearly is demonstrated with this action. Instead of killing jobs, Mr. Speaker, maybe they should try creating some. While this federal government keeps looking for ways to support Bombardier that will cost taxpayers billions of dollars, they keep ignoring the private sector solutions that wouldn't cost taxpayers a dime. Mr. Speaker, Bombardier has designed a best-in-class aircraft that is ideally suited for smaller airports like Billy Bishop. Expanding the airport would create a market from Bombardier from any company who chooses to use this airport. And let's go back to my earlier point, Mr. Speaker. It's about keeping Canada competitive, keeping our communities competitive, and we fight for air service. Mr. Speaker, we were all elected based on our ability to see local issues through a national lens. The future of Bombardier and Billy Bishop will have national repercussions if this Liberal government continues to abuse their decision-making powers. It is my sincere hope that all members in this House will support today's motion and that the Prime Minister will begin the process of supporting Bombardier and the C-Series aircraft program without asking for taxpayers to foot the bill. Thank you very much.